the most important thing. Thank you. Okay. I'd like to start out this morning with thanking a few people. Um, we really have a team that works on Adventures in Living. And as you know, there are 3 facilitators, actually 4 at this point. So I'd like to first thank Dick Martin. Without Dick, we would not have Adventures in Living. So let's. And then Debbie Dean is a facilitator, but she had to be away today. And we have our newest facilitator, Jane Wood. Let's give her a big hand too. Yeah. Beside those people, we have several people who work behind the scenes. And Mary Sue Koppel is one person. You saw her the last 3 weeks, actually. And Frank Townsend, who was right back here. Frank, put your hand up. Yeah, and thank those people. We'd never do it without them. Now, actually, Pat Toscas is here, and she was our Adventure in Living person last week, and she just said she'd like to say something about that. So I said, Pat, sit down and then come on up, and then I'll be back.
Okay, I want to thank everyone who sent me messages about my talk. It was really overwhelming. And there was one in particular that stood out to me. And it said, often we don't know about someone until we read their obituary. And isn't that true? So I encourage all of you to take the opportunity, Adventures in Living, and share your story. You all have a story, and inquiring minds want to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. That sort of saves me a few words, to say the least. But we're always interested in having you volunteer to do an Adventure in Living. And even if you don't volunteer, I probably, and Dick will, and Debbie will all be chasing you down if you haven't done an adventure yet. Could I have the hands of the people in here who've done an Adventure in Living? Okay, and the rest of you look around, because those people can be good resources for you, and they can talk to you about the experience and what it means, actually. Now, today we have Keith Berg, and I know Keith, and every time I see his name, I think of what he does in music. I remember him in the chorus in the Okamic Singers as a singer. I remember him beating time for the rest of us who couldn't keep time. And he did that also for the chamber players. I also remember him out in the lobby playing, and I don't remember the name of the group, the Rockers, that's right. He was the drummer playing with the late Hank Pennypacker and Al Goebel, and I think that Ron Hoops sang with you too. Ron is right back there, and he's done an Adventure in Living, and as has his wife. But and then I always think of Keith over in the health pavilion with Bev Cohn, who's right back there, who also has done an Adventure in Living, singing and playing with the people in the health pavilion. Keith was a self-described science nerd with an interest in music. And I think today we'll find out a lot more about Keith. So at this point, I'm going to call him up and ask him to get going.
Thank you very much, Diane. I thank all of you for being willing to. Can you hear me all right? Let me get this back a little closer. For coming not once but twice to see me through this, and I thank ILR for agreeing to let me be my ego show up here two times. But I particularly want to thank Diane Haynes, because she tried for years to get me to come up here. Oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. She finally had twisted my arm enough that I, couldn't get it back into position, so I agreed. And it turned out to be the most amazing experience for me, going back over all of these things. You think you know all of those things, but until you are forced to remember them all and go through them all, you really don't. And so it was like rediscovering myself. Anyway, thanks to Diane for that. Oop, this doesn't want to go again. There we go. Whoops. All right. There we go. All right. Part one, the last year, was about my childhood years. And it talked about all my life up through high school pretty much. But the focus of that was on the limited geography that my life had. And that wasn't to me then, and nor is it even now, a particularly bad thing. It was a good thing because I knew the community so well. I was raised in a very small town. And so the focus was on that. And we ended with it starting to expand my horizon after I got into college, and in particularly graduate school. Then things started to change dramatically. But part two is really going to be more about what the title says it's going to be about those transitions, transactions, and transformations. What happened in your life that changed you and maybe changed you to being a different person? So in both your childhood and adult years. And so those will be the focus for today. So I want to start with the two most important transitions in my life, and probably this is going to be the same thing for many of you. One, meeting and marrying Kathy. I mean, that changes your life dramatically. And then, of course, later, becoming a parent. Now, as a psychologist, those were even, and in some ways, more important, because those are involved personal changes, and that was what all my training was about. So it really had an effect, very dramatic. Well, let me start with Kathy, because how did we meet? We met when I had started in graduate school in 65, and at the University of Wisconsin. It was a wonderful thing. I was there a year, and then this young lady in the following beginning of that summer of 66 showed up, and our advisor, she was in the University of Wisconsin too, actually, because we both had the same mentor. So I would see her every day, and our advisor that summer was going to go to Greece, and she gave us an assignment, and the assignment was to redo some of the programs that we had working in the laboratory. Now, these were the days when programs were not quite like they were today with your personal computer. So we had to actually learn to program, which we did that summer. And then we got linked up. How did we get linked up? Now, that's not really a misspelling there, so let me tell you why. Because this is called a link computer. I saw some heads nodding there. Somebody knows what this is. This was before the days of personal computers and just after only big giant mainframe computers. The University of Wisconsin Medical School, and we were working with an advisor who was associated with the medical school, had bought two of these computers, and they were at today's By the way, today's dollars, those computers would cost $200,000 each. But they had 2 whole K of memory, 2,000 bytes of memory in it. I mean, this was a big deal. You could only program in one of those 1K, but you could do it. So, but nonetheless, it was, those 2 computers came in and a lot of people were very interested. It was hard to get time on it. So you could, if you went at night, you could go and you could get more time on your computer. And my phone is ringing in my ears and talk to my hearing aids. There, I could not get around that. I thought I shut those the time off. Anyway, the computers. So Kathy and I decided, both decided we would go and work on those 2 computers together. And I would work on one computer and she would work on the other one. It's kind of in parallel play with and this was for hours. We were both very much night people. And so we would sit and work on those computers and then decided we needed a little break. There was a coffee room right close by. We'd get by and started talking. And night after night, we were doing this because this was a major job that we had to do over the summer. And that was our only job that summer. So we had a temporary advisor for that summer. And at the end of the summer, that temporary advisor was so excited to talk to our advisor when she got back from Greece to tell her about that Kathy and I were a thing. So we were a thing, yes. So that's how we meet. Now, it wasn't long before we decided this was ourselves that it was a thing. So my parents invited Kathy on to come on up. They wanted to meet her. We were sitting in our living room at our house there, and Kathy got a chance to meet her. Now, if you look at this picture carefully, you notice a funny little white thing in my hand there. What is that? That is a white rat, and that was our first pet. Yes, a white rat pet. We were taking a graduate class in some sort of research class that involved training little white rats to do something or other. And at the end of the course, these were supposed to be euthanized, the polite name for doing them in. And we did not want to lose that little white rat. So we decided to take it home. Now, we weren't living together at the time, but Kathy had an apartment, I had an apartment, and she decided she could take it. I had a roommate, so she could live, she was living alone, she could take it. So she brought it home and we got some food and put it in a little old coffee can. You remember butternut coffee? I think it's still around, but in any case, that all is our little white rat's food was in butternut coffee can. So guess what the rat got called? Butternut. We decided to make it a little better. Buttercup. Sorry, I said it wrong. Buttercup, not butternut. So that you're seeing now Buttercup. You've been introduced to our family. So here we are, that spring, that June, we got married and had a wedding at our house in Cloquet, Minnesota. And it was, that was a wonderful time. Now you're going to hear more about Kathy because she contributed so much both to my career and to other things that you'll hear about. And this, after a few years, was our next major transition for both Kathy and I, of course. This is our new adopted baby. She was adopted at 2 days old. Now, if you're familiar with adoptions, that's very rare, but this was a private adoption. We got to see her at the hospital 2 days after she was born, and the next day or two, she was brought home, and this is, I think, a picture of Kathy that first day holding our daughter. And of course, we had another pet by then. Little Charlie was there, and Charlie had to meet our daughter Adrian as well. And I'll give you a little picture. one of my favorite pictures. So its bright eyes were beautiful. So those were our two big transitions. But we've got other kinds of transitions that aren't quite that grand, but are still very important for my life. And so I asked myself what those transitions meant, what were they that made me me? And as I said that to myself, I just finally started said, but who is me? Who am I anyway? That should be obvious, but it's interesting when you think about what are the single things that I think are most critical that got me. And I came up with four things. Unfortunately, it would take 2 hours for me to talk about all four of them. So I will talk about two of them. I won't hold you here for that long. You wouldn't stay here that long anyway. So just who is me that I'm going to talk about today at least? One is music, just as Diane talked about. And she's given most of my talk here, so I can skip to part two, right? No, not all of it. The other part of me is really extraordinary transition, and that is having to do with artwork. And I'll talk a lot more about that. So what I'm going to do is have a kind of a storyline about each of these things that talk about what the transitions were that brought me to be in music and in art. So first of all, there's a musical me. Now that old phonograph there is I have a picture of that because it's very much like the one that was in our house. And we had music playing as early as I can remember, every single day throughout the day. My mother loved music. And, and in fact, I had a thought. This phonograph was sitting right beside the most comfortable chair in the living room. And I had a thought as I was thinking about, being raised on music all the time. If my mother, when she was pregnant, was sitting in that chair and the music was playing, and maybe music started with me a bit before I was born. Maybe I had some fetus music input, huh? Now, the only one in my family immediate family, who played any kind of instrument, my mother didn't, my brother didn't. I have one brother 5 years older than I am, didn't. But my father had played a trumpet, and he still had his trumpet. And every once in a while, he decided it would be, maybe I should dig this out and see how we could do it. And we got to listen to it. So we got a chance to listen to this thing, and it was very special. That was the sound that he could get out. His lip was gone, I'm afraid. So, he would kind of look discouraged, and he would fiddle with the mouthpiece and try to warm it up, and he would try again. Let's see, can I go back and get that? Every time, same thing. So on the right was my dad when he decided to bring that trumpet out, and on the left is my dad when he was a little discouraged about that event. Now, my aunt, one of my aunts, my Aunt Ann, who lived at a small farm that was only about 10 miles away, and we were out visiting that farm very often. She was a good pianist. She was an untrained pianist. There was no lessons involved, but she had learned to do it on her own. And she had a particular kind of music that she loved to play and that I loved listening to. See if you recognize this music. Oh, come on. Don't want to play for some reason. I don't know. Wow. Unfortunately, you won't get to hear it. But it was boogie woogie music. How many of you remember boogie woogie music? Okay, I didn't need to play it for you then. I thought maybe somebody wouldn't know. But she played boogie woogie music, and if you know that music, it's very, bouncy and you could hardly sit still. And as a kid, that was wonderful. And as someone who was a future drummer, it was even better. Now, my next transition was really in kindergarten. And of course, there was a kindergarten band. Kindergarten bands were all rhythmic instruments. We didn't, nobody played real instruments. You just beat on things and so forth, little sticks and tambourines and the like. And I was in that band, but oddly enough, I didn't get to play one of those sticks or one of that little toy drum or any of those tambourines or anything because I was the director of that band. I don't know how I got chosen as the director, but I remember Mrs. Peterson, who was the teacher of the kindergarten class. I loved her. She was very nice. She drew a big picture of a triangle, and she pasted that to the wall. And I was standing there for a week or two before we were going to do our little concert, going, we were doing obviously a piece in 3/4. So whether my classmates paid any attention to me or not, I don't know. I think I was mainly there for display. But anyway, that was my first musical performance at age 5. Clearly a child prodigy. Well, that continued in grade school. We were very fortunate at the time, something I think is really missing today in most schools, some almost entirely. And that was not just somebody who did come in and sing with the children, but someone who actually came and taught them musical instruments. So in 4th grade, I started to learn to play drums. Other people started to play trombones or tubas or whatever were the instruments we could drag up. And 4th grade. And so the good friend of the director, the music director, was actually a friend of my mother's, and he would show up over at our house all of the time. And so I got to know him. And I think he maybe gave my parents a hint that maybe I was doing fairly well with this, because when 1 year later, when I was 10, I was given this as my birthday present. Now, that drum that you see there that I was given at age 10, the picture of that was taken about 10 days ago. I still have the drum. It's the only snare drum I've ever had, and it still works perfectly well after 71 years of lots and lots of playing on it. So but I wasn't the only one who was doing well in the music. By the 6th grade, we had a 6th grade marching band. And you see that there's all kinds of different instruments. So somehow just in 2 years, that director was able to get enough kids playing instruments that we could actually add to march, believe it or not. So it was a wonderful experience. Well, the next few years were filled with me being from all through high school and middle school. I was in every kind of possible music group that I could find, singing, playing, whatever I could find to play. So it was a wonderful, wonderful experience for me. The next transition, of course, came when I started college and I majored in music. I majored in music and psychology, a double major. So I was in music for 2 years. At the end of 2 years, I had some thinking about it, and I decided one of these careers I can earn a living at, and one of these I can't. So I dropped the music major to a minor, but it did not change my interest in music in the least. Changed a few classes, but I continued to be throughout college in every kind of musical group I could possibly be in. And apparently I had by then started playing with smaller musical groups, bought myself a crude drum set, already had the snare drum. So then later on bought another one. And so by the end of college, I was playing in all kinds of different groups. So for example, I had played, this isn't the group that I was in. I couldn't find any pictures of that original one, but I played with an accordion player. We played polkas and schottisches because where I was raised in northern Minnesota, that was where we were dominated by Scandinavian countries. So the music was, and I love polkas and schottisches. And if you've never heard of a schottisch, it's too bad because they're fun too. But I also played in something dramatically different, and that was a country western band. Now, why would I like the guy who wants to play polkas also want to be in a country western band? Because any kind of music. I wanted to play any kind of music and loved it if I got the opportunities. And this one paid pretty well. So I managed to, my last 2 years, I was paying not my board, but my room costs by playing different groups. But the ones that I most liked playing in were the jazz groups. And so I played in a number of these. I don't know where this picture was taken, but a different band, a jazz group that I was in, played in the best restaurant in Duluth, Minnesota, where I was going to college. And we played every weekend, really a lot of fun. So I had a lot of different musical experiences. Now, after retirement, I got involved with, during my career, my music playing went down, was reduced. I still was playing occasionally with a church band, but there just wasn't the time for the most part to be playing a whole lot of music. So about the time I retired, I got a call from somebody in a klezmer band here in Gainesville called the Klezmer Cats. And you have had at least the opportunity to see them, I think it's 3 times here at Okamic, relatively recently, in fact. And that's a 10-piece group. Now, klezmer music, if you're not familiar with it, is a kind of a Jewish cultural music. And we played in all kinds of Jewish festivals as well as other kinds of things, other retirement places. We play a fair amount around town. But interestingly, of the 10 members, only 4 are Jewish. And so I'm not Jewish, but they hired me anyway. But we all love the music, so it was fine. So my next opportunity came when I moved to Okamic. And Al Goebel was, this was in 2016. When I came, every month or so, Al Goebel will go out and do, I think, a sing-along with his accordion. And so, of course, when I saw that, I went down to listen to him. And after he'd been playing for a while, and after he was done playing, I went down and said, Al, that was really great. I play a little bit of drums. If you're interested in possibly playing, giving it a try together, I'd love that. And he immediately said yes. And we played it. So we started playing every once in a while, just Al and I. And then pretty soon we realized we could use some more help. And so we got Ron Hoops into it, good friend of Al's. And occasionally his dear wife, down there they are back there. And then later on we had Hank Pennypacker join us. And so we became the Rockers. So now you can not only hear about the Rockers, you could see the Rockers. Now, the other thing was that I had met Bev Cohn, and Jan Haver were doing a sing-along over at the Health Pavilion that Diane mentioned. And Bev plays the piano, and she had heard me playing with Al Goebel, and so she asked if I might be interested in doing the sing-along too. Now, I don't know, doing a sing-along at the Health Pavilion, I don't know what they thought about a piano and a drummer. The only problem was I did not want to carry and couldn't have carried my drum set over there every single week that we do it. So I had purchased before a drum box, a cajon, it's called if you're the Latin version, and it's just literally a box that you beat on, and that worked very well because I could carry it easily over there, and so that playing with Bev was me there sitting on my cajon. And we really do have fun. And actually, they apparently when a couple times I haven't been able to go, Bev said she gets questions about, you know, where'd the guy in the box go? Where's the guy in the box? So they remember things over there. Now, I have played in so many different kinds. I've mentioned that several times. This list is much too long to go through all of them, but I'll just highlight a few that you haven't heard about. One, I played in the Duluth Symphony for a number of years. I've played in many different musicals, bands for many different onstage musicals here in Gainesville. I was had a music fraternity, and we had a 16-piece jazz dance band. And you remember my aunt with the boogie woogie? Yes, I have played boogie woogie here. Now, how many of you know Steve Sternberg? Remember hearing Steve Sternberg? He's a terrific entertainer. He's played at the Oak Room here a couple of times, but every month he plays over at the Health Pavilion. I talked to Steve one time about possibly playing with him. So he hesitantly, he is really a terrific musician and entertainer. He said he would give it a try, and he really liked it. And so we keep doing that. I haven't been able to go to all of them, but that is wonderful to play. And my aunt would be so happy about that. So, in kind of a summary of my music part, I started out music very early, and my first performance at age 5. I continued through high school, and I am still doing it. And you can put your hat on that one. That one's, I love the hats. I love the hats. All right. Now, the second of those two parts of me, an artful me. Now, this is just really a striking change to me in many, many ways. First of all, that line, an artful me and art, I just didn't go together. I mean, my mother was a terrific artist. You'll see that in a moment. But me as an artist, no. I mean, I could put things together, which I did with some stained glass, but that was just sort of the mechanical things, the little crafty things, until I got to Okemic, and that was a change. So let me back up a little bit here and start with how that became about. So the first part was transition was watching my mom do her artwork. Now, I only have 2 pieces of her work, unfortunately, because much of what she did was like painting designs on the cabinet doors. You can't save your cabinet doors. So she didn't have too many things, and she gave away so much of what she did. So I have this plate, but there's also one other one that's even more important to me. And that was this photo here of these, I guess they're fire lilies. And I really like this piece. And so when I started doing some stained glass, I made a piece like that. And some of you have seen that piece. It's been on display a couple of times here. That was inspired very much by my mother. Now, another important transition was building our house. Now, why would building a house put you in that situation? Well, we wanted a transom window. And, you know, I liked the idea. I liked the look of stained glass at the time, but I had no idea how to do stained glass. So this was now in about 1976 or 7, something like that. And, and I had never done anything like this. You know, Kathy said, maybe we could do that. We had 2 spots in mind in the new house that we were building. One was this transom window, and the other was a bathroom window. Our master bathroom had a window that was about 1.5 feet wide and about 4.5 feet high. So I said, okay, I'll start with the one, but you've got to do the design because I don't know anything about art. And Kathy did. And see, she was important to me. Um, so Kathy went ahead and did this design for me. So this was my very first stained glass piece. I'd never had any training in it because there wasn't any training to be had here in Gainesville. There was no internet that you could just go Google lots of things. So zero training. I didn't have any of the right tools. I had a little electric soldering iron that you're melting lead with you, and can't get the lead too hot. So I had to keep unplugging it and plugging it in the wall and unplugging and plugging in the wall in order to keep it the temperature from getting too high. I had one cheap old glass cutter, but nonetheless managed to get this piece done. Now, I'll be talking about in a minute, but my teaching classes here. The first piece that I have folks do who take my class has 12 pieces in it. And that's, anybody here who's taken that class? Yes. You know how that first piece is not so easy to do, 12 pieces. Well, this is my first piece, and it has over 90 pieces. We didn't know what the heck, we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. I mean, it took forever to get that done, but it did get done. However, the bathroom window that was about 5 times the size of this, we decided maybe we could do without that bathroom window. So this is my start in stained glass. And I decided to continue doing it. I really did enjoy it, but nothing more as elaborate as this. So often Christmas time was a time when I would be thinking about doing some stained glass to give people for presents. And so I had some angels were always popular at Christmas. So I did some angels like these 2. And then I had a friend who was in the secretary in the psychology office who was also a good friend and really helpful to me. And she was a very religious lady, so I made her a small little cross here. And the little funny bumps on there are some sort of decorative soldering that I have done on it. And so I was enjoying doing those little kinds of things. But none of these were original designs. They were just designs I found on publications. And but it was I still did have fun doing it. But when I got close to retirement, again, during my career when I couldn't do much music, I couldn't do a whole lot of stained glass either. But when we were getting ready to retire, I said, maybe I should actually take a stained glass class and see what I'm supposed to be doing here. So I went ahead, but Kathy and I both took a stained glass class through Santa Fe College courses. It was up in High Springs, so we had a little bit of drive, but it was a fun drive up there. And I did this lampshade. This was my last project for the class. And I still have that lampshade. And it gave me the first idea that you could actually do stained glass in 3 dimensions if you did it right. And that was very important for me, that class. So I came upon, after having done that, I came later on upon a book on doing stained glass that talked about something called whirls, like whirling around. And this was one of the pieces, this is the first whirl that I did. It's a Canadian goose. It's 3-dimensional. There are 6 different, those orange pieces that go from the top of the piece to the bottom. There's 6 of those in a hexagon shape, and they're attached at the bottom and the top. and the bird's wings help hold it together, and some of the other stuff, the little grass from coming up in the grass. So I found out how to do this, and I really thought that was neat. So I tried a couple more of those. This is one that I did with some butterflies in it. This was given to another woman who was a secretary in my department, and she was retiring, and she really loved butterflies, so I made this for her. But the real change, the way I get to be called an art for me, or for me allowing me to think of it that way, because I certainly did not think of it that way when I came to Okamic. But the move to Okamic, actually, it was before I moved here. Knew we were going to be moving in about October, and I got a email saying, you know, the Okamic was having a big event that they were going to show off for the various different groups who are active at Okamic. And if I wanted to come, I could do that. So I came over just to see. This was in the spring of 2016, 6 months before we moved here. And I came up to a table, and it said something about artwork. So I knew there was a stained glass room here. And so I stopped at that table, and Jane, I think it was Jane Levy. I said, Jane, who else doing stained glass here? And she said, oh, nobody is. Nobody? You have a stained glass room and there's nobody doing it? So without a thought and no plan mind, I said, would you like me to teach a class? And she jumped at class, but jumped at the, so the spring before, no, actually it was the summer. The summer before I came here, I taught the first class in stained glass. And this was the class members: Phil Morrison, Jane Levy, Mary Kilgore, Heather Gilkey, and Russ Golly. And that's their very first piece. And that piece is the same one that design is the same one I use for all of my classes because it really works well. So I have had now, I think, 5 classes, but I really started doing, and Jane Levy particularly, but others as well, kept, as I was doing stained glass when I got here, kept telling me I was an artist. And that just, I felt very uncomfortable with it. I just do crafty things. I don't think like an artist, but they kept pushing on that. So, and they arranged to get ways to put stained glass up on the windows of the gallery. And so they were fairly serious about doing this kind of thing and having stained glass be part of the art world here. So that was my start. So as I started thinking more like an artist, even if I didn't feel like it, there were 2 pictures on the wall of the beside the elevators on the 4th floor of Building 2, where we are, and I would see these 2 pictures of bird cages, and see them every day, walk by them, and I kind of liked them, and I thought, one day I just suddenly thought, hey, I wonder if I could do something like that in stained glass. And that was the first one of these. I do these, I've done now 3 of these. I'll show you the other 2. But this was the first one. And I was flabbergasted at how people reacted to these. They were so delighted with these. I've wound up putting this in I joined the Art League. That was a whole, just me joining an art league. I did the Gainesville Fine Arts Association. And they had once a year for a number of years had an arrangement with a lunch place and an ice cream shop up on 5th Avenue. I can't think of the name of it now. Sweet Dreams. No, not Sweet Dreams. Sweet Man. Yes, that was the one. And they had all kinds of windows on there, and they would invite us, people, and wall space. They would go and have an art show from the people who were in the art gallery. And so I brought this piece up, this bird, and I got a call a week later and say, your piece just sold. in 1 week, apparently that was the fastest they'd ever sold any piece that they'd had there. So clearly people like this. So I'm decided to do some more birds in the cage. So I did this one, which was a hummingbird, and that one was commissioned by someone here at Okamic for their daughter as a gift for Christmas. And then Roseanne Sprout asked me to do a one, and this is sitting up in her window on the building one. And then I got involved in doing woodworking. And I wondered if there's some way I could combine doing wood and stained glass. And this is what I came up with. This piece, what I was surprised at is how difficult the woodworking was to get it very precise. To do mitered corners when you have these angles is very difficult. You have to become, you have to know, you go back and figure out, where was my geometry course? So anyway, this was a piece, and Midge Smith has bought this piece, and it's sitting up in a window in her place. So I've been really happy with doing this. Now, this is a dog. I'm getting close to my time. It's working out well. Okay, this was a picture of Kathy and I from graduate school have a very good friend, and he has lost his wife a few years ago, and so we started having Zoom calls with him. After the Zoom stuff, one of the benefits of the pandemic was that we've all learned how to do Zoom things. So we were doing Zoom every 2 weeks, and he kept talking about his dog, Molly. Now that was interesting to me because my mother's name was Mildred, but she was always called Molly. So I had, his dog, Molly, he'd talk about Molly, and I'd think about Molly. And he had sent me, he's a photographer, a very good photographer, and he had sent me one of his pieces that I had said something about liking. And so I felt like I needed to return the favor because he wouldn't let me pay anything for it. And I had learned to do, there was a gentleman, Jesse Arnold was his name. He was on the second floor of building 2. And he was doing a kind of woodwork called intarsia. And intarsia is a little bit like doing stained glass, except that you're using different kinds of wood, colors of wood, instead of different colors of stained glass. And you only use the wood's natural color, and you put pieces together of this. So it's a little like stained glass, except you have to sculpt it to look like that dog. So this one probably you haven't seen because I sent it to my friend right away. Now all of the wood in this piece is the is the color. That red tongue is that's wood. There's a wood called pedonk that's is very red, and it worked perfectly for this. The black really is that. So the only part that's not natural is the pupils of the eye. I had to dye those. This is my latest piece, however. So you're seeing the first one. No one else has seen this yet. This came from, and this is the thing that's made me start thinking as an artist is I would get these inspirations by just things that were around me, like the bird cages. And Kathy and I have been, when they put the new coffee machine in the coffee shop, we started getting coffees in the afternoon and going out in this last spring and enjoying the weather out on the balcony near the coffee shop and doing that often, going into the bar, but going onto the balcony to have my drink at the bar. And I think watching these beautiful magnolia blossoms. And I loved looking at those things. And at some point, it suddenly dawned on me, hey, maybe I could make one out of stained glass. And then, no, that's not going to work. Well, what about wood? Well, maybe. I mean, it's not intarsia. So I drew up a kind of a design, and and counted the number of petals. I had about 1,000 pictures of magnolia blossoms about what it was going to do. I have the magnolias, at least we have around here, have 9 petals. So each of those petals is made separately. And let's see, I think I have a, yes. You can see on the edge of this leaf, you can see on the edge of this leaf, this petal here, that really is about as thin as a true magnolia petal. So getting wood cut down that thin was a real challenge, but I love those kind of challenges. And all of this wood is also natural except for the green leaves, because you cannot find green wood. You just can't find green wood. So that is dyed green. That the backing that it's on is again that pedonk, that reddish kind of, in this case, it looks a little more orange. But anyway, that is my final piece. And so I will leave you with that. And I thank you very much for coming today and being online. Thank you. Be glad to answer any questions. Jane?
Yeah, you know, the nature versus nurture question, whether it's our DNA or whether it's our environment, you know, being a psychologist, I wonder, can you say, let's say you had grown up and your mom had not been into music, and you didn't hear much music. Do you think you would still have found that channel?
That's an interesting question. And the same thing is about, I got into
Art
stained
too.
glass because my father was really, you had to fix your own, everything had to be fixed on your own. And so I was used to the mechanics part of stained glass. That's what attracted it to me in a way. Plus, I like the looks of it a lot. But whether it's genetic or not, I have thought about that a lot. And, you know, since nobody in my family was a musician to speak of, except my aunt, and actually she's only partly, for complicated reasons I won't go into, she is my half aunt. You know, I don't know how much genetics could play. I just can't, for music particularly for me, it is so much a part of my life and being that I can't imagine some part of that is not genetic, but who knows?
Well, thank you. This was a beautiful story.
Thank you, thank you.
Other questions?
Anybody else?
Oh,
Thank you very much for being here. Oh, you have a
I have a
question. Oh,
question.
Diane has a question.
You haven't really told us much about.
I have it.
It's not on? Okay, I'll try to, okay, like this. Thank you. Yeah, you have told us about your artistic and your musical side, but what did you do? What was your day job?
Oh,
Just a little bit about that.
that was one I had, as I mentioned early on, that I had 4 parts of my life that I decided, and that was, of course, one of them. And I was a research psychologist. I loved doing it when I was a kid, I was taking every science class, as you mentioned. I had originally a picture of a Scientific American magazine from the 1950s, because I used to love going to our tiny library, town of 9,000, and they had one science journal, one, that was it. Not much of a library, but it was Scientific American and it was great. And you could read about all kinds of things. I got into initially parapsychology because of a man named John B. Rhine. And parapsychology is, you know, can I move things with my mind and those kinds of weird sort of things. But the thing that attracted me about John B. Rhine was that he did he was a serious researcher, and he wanted to know, not is this, somebody looking in a globe of glass and trying to tell you what your afterlife was going to be like, but he was serious about it, and he did formal work trying to show whether or not there really was some ways that our brains could move things around, could know what other people are thinking, and so on, all kinds of the variations of parapsychology. That's how I got started. But what really got me was the research. And I wanted to know about people, and I had lots of reasons. Was fairly physiologically oriented research for a psychologist because we were working with infants and children, and particularly in infants, you have a hard time getting them to answer questions. So, but their body can tell you a lot. So we were looking at changes in the heart rate when infants, or anybody, you and I too, are very interested in something and you're paying close attention to it, your heart rate goes down. You might think it would go up, but it doesn't. If you're very excited about something in the sense of whatever, then it might go up, or if you're exercising. But when you're just simply paying close attention quietly, it goes down. And for infants, it goes way down. It's really surprising. It will go drop 15, 20, or sometimes 30 beats a minute, and they're looking at something. So you really know when they're interested and when they're not. Of course, you can do this for vision, you can see what they're looking at, but for auditory things, how do you know if they're interested in it or not? And we were interested in whether they were paying attention to it. What happened is you repeated it. Did they get bored by it? And they do. And then could we make a change once they stopped paying attention to it? If we made a small change in it, did they notice it? And they do. So this was a very useful tool for lots of reasons. Kathy and I were both involved in research on trying to test hearing, coming up with new ways to test hearing in infants. And that one of the ways was to use physiological changes to see if they could hear something and what they heard and what distinctions they could hear. So my research then later on moved much more towards what was called executive functioning. And as I grew older, the age of my clients and my participants in my studies grew older. So by the time I retired, I was working primarily with retired people. So a developmental psychologist who just, did it that way.
Great. Thank you, Keith. I think we can say comfortably that Keith uses both sides of his brain. Any other questions?
It's interesting. One side of my brain, however, does not as good. I can remember hundreds and probably 100,000. I don't know. If I just hear the music. But if somebody says, "Oh, do you know this song?" and they say the name, I don't know it. Sing me some of it. Bev is shaking her head because she's heard me say this 100 times. Yeah. So that's the right side of my brain. I know that's working. My left side of my brain has a few problems, but anyway, we'll leave it at that.
Keith, thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming today. It's been wonderful. Have a wonderful day.
And we'll see you next week for Janet.